Like and subscribe on the way in the door. My people, today, I think we're going to go with the theme on Mondays that we will make Mondays in the 90s. And because I really want to get to being more consistent with the 90s series and educating the youngsters and some of you fanboys on the 90s. So every Monday I will definitely do a 90s theme video. And I still may, when I have more time, I still may do a basketball related video as well. But anyway, today, let's talk about Martin Lawrence in the 90s. For those of you who grew up in the 90s, like I did, you probably or may have first encountered Martin Lawrence on a show called What's Happening Now. For those of you who don't remember, What's Happening Now was kind of like the second half of a series called What's Happening, where they had Raj, Rerun, Dwayne, the little sister D. I can't remember the mother's name off the top of my head. If somebody remembers that, please drop it down in the comments. But then, so you had What's Happening Now, and I think eventually that went off the air and they bought it back. What's Happening was the original series. It went off the air and then they bought back What's Happening Now with those same characters, Raj, D, Dwayne, Rerun, and Martin Lawrence made his appearance on that show. And I think that was, What's Happening Now was an 80s show. I want to say probably mid-80s. Yeah, probably mid-80s. But anyway, so that's where I first encountered Martin Lawrence on TV. Now, but in the 90s, Martin reemerged with the show Martin. And when I tell you that the Martin show was such a huge part of the 90s. Matter of fact, Martin Lawrence as a comedian was such a big part of the 90s. Not only from the show, but he was doing a lot of movies in the 90s. Bad Boys, the first one of those came about in the 90s. And then you had movies like Blue Streak. And of course, he was one of the stars. He starred alongside Eddie Murphy in the movie Life. All those movies took place in the 90s. Martin was a huge star in the 90s. And he was still doing this comedian stand-up thing. And like I said, the influence of the Martin show in the 90s is immeasurable. I think I remember being in middle school when that show first kind of came onto the scene, and all the little sayings on Martin and face mushing and Martin's exaggerated comedy, doing stuff like "bad ow" and all that kind of stuff. I'm sure y'all remember that if you grew up in that time. It was just epic. And the characters from the show. So you had Martin, his two boys, Tommy and Cole, his girl Gina, and her best friend Pam. Those were like the main characters of the show. And then you had the next door neighbor, Shanae, who was played by Martin. Which I found out, it was watching some interview, and it actually turns out that Martin may have taken that character from another comedian. But I can't remember what podcast or whatever I was watching, but it seemed like it was a pretty legit claim. But anyway, so you had Shanae, who was the next door neighbor, and then you had just a variety of characters on that show, from Little Roscoe to can't forget Jerome's in the house. Who else was on that? Otis, the police officer. And so yeah, Martin was playing a lot of different characters on that show. And like I said, I remember being in school, and people would reenact those characters on a regular basis. But like I've said in several videos, the show Martin was so important and so iconic in the 90s because, to me, that show encapsulated the urban life, it especially for, I won't say for all, but for a lot of black people around that time, and a lot of people in general, I've said it before. To me, the 90s was the last decade of actual romance. However, I will say this, the 90s you could already see, which really even back in the 80s, but the 90s you could already kind of see the dynamics of the relationship of men and women changing. The whole career woman thing was being pushed heavily, and all these things you could see playing out on the Martin show. Like I said, it was him and his girl Gina. His girl Gina was a career woman, and Martin was on the show was a radio DJ personality. And to me, the dynamic between those two was really showing the new adjustment between women being career women and still trying to maintain the dynamics between men and women relationships. So you had that dynamic going on. You had the dynamic between Martin and his boys, and the whole, probably what a lot of our friendships were like back during those times. A lot of teasing each other, and like I said, a lot of playing hoops and, going to the club and different stuff that took place in that show was really relevant to what was happening in the culture at that time. What else? And like I said, in a lot of the music at that time, again, Martin had a lot of the big artists at that time on his show, sometimes doing musical performances, sometimes just making a cameo. Like I remember the episode with Snoop Dogg, and they were having a house party, or this something to that. I don't think that somehow they were having a party that got out of control. I can't remember who's. I think it might have been at Gina's house or something, or Pam's house. But then they had Jodeci on there, which I just did a video on them. Like I said, to me, that group represents R&B in the 90s. If I was gonna pick one group, that would be the group that I would pick. But he had Jodeci on there performing lately, and and he kind of joins in a comedic way on the song. But yeah, to me, Martin, not only his show was an iconic show in the 90s, but he also, like I said, brought in a lot of iconic figures on his show. So, like I said, for you young kids, to me, the Martin Show is definitely something worth, trying to get through some seasons of. I believe it's a total of 6 seasons of the Martin Show. But, to me, I would say the first 3, I think, were the best. And the 4th was pretty good as well. To me, by the 5th season, there was a lot of inner dynamics as far as the cast of the show that, to me, you could tell was messing with the continuity of the show. And to me, by the 5th season, it kind of didn't feel the same. Matter of fact, I believe it was like some there was some drama between himself and I can't remember the girl that played as Gina off the top of my head. I can't remember her name. If you remember her name, drop it. Tisha Campbell. There was some drama between them two, and I believe actually what happened by the 5th season, if I'm not mistaken, is they actually couldn't shoot scenes together anymore. So a lot of the scenes would be either her in it or him in it, even though they was still supposed to be together at that time. I forgot how they made that work out. But yeah, so to me, by the 5th season, a lot of it, a lot of the continuity of the show, like something clearly was off in the chemistry of the show by the 5th season, which made it, you know, not as good. But anyway, yeah, like I said, I just wanted to talk about the iconicness of Martin Lawrence and the Martin Show in the 90s. Like I said, not only was the Martin Show iconic, but Martin Lawrence himself was one of the most iconic comedians in the 90s, movie star as well. Like I said, so yeah, young kids, go check out some Martin Lawrence so that you can get a feel for how all this stuff ties in together with the music, the hip hop, the R&B, and of course, what we about on this channel most is Michael Jordan. And like I said, and the Jordan influence on the 90s. But anyway, let me know what you guys think in the comments. For those of you who lived through the era, if there's anything else about Martin Lawrence or the Martin Show that you think is relevant to his effect on 90s culture, please drop it in the comments. Let me know what you think. You all have a fantastic day, and I will see you next time. All right.